Hey guys, my name's Danny Rego, and I'm here with Champion Briefs doing a topic analysis for the NFL National Tournament this coming June. So the topic you guys are going to be looking at is resolved the benefits of American drone strikes against foreign targets outweigh the harms. So I think that this resolution is pretty clear, but before we go ahead and get into that, I really want to talk about the type of tournament, the type of judging that you're going to see at the national tournament. It's going to be very random because because the tournament requires that all schools bring judges, right? So there's no hired judges, there's no like missing judge fee that schools can just pay. So it means you're going to be getting a lot of parents and a lot of coaches who either don't have any experience judging at all or have experience judging on the local circuits because a lot of states refuse, or a lot of districts and schools don't leave the state to compete on the national circuit and only compete locally except for nationals in June. So that means that you're either going to be getting one of three judges. You may be very lucky and get a decent flow judge or a judge who understands national circuit public forum or a public forum in general and the general ideas. The second type of judge that you're going to get is going to be one who is going to be a parent from a local circuit on a state that doesn't travel, or from a school that doesn't travel outside of their district for debate. Which means that they're not going to be very familiar with what's going on. They're going to be very confused, and they're going to be looking for you to simplify the rounds. They're going to be looking for you to give a lot of emotional appeal, to do a lot of weighing, and to ignore the flow because they have no idea what that is. So your job when you have this judge is to simplify the round and keep it very calm and keep it very simple, right? Ignore the flow. Don't go out, reading 10 cards using jargon saying extend, turn, right? Make sure that you use the author's name, that you use like the date that the author published the card, and make sure that you reference it as a piece of evidence or an article or a study and not a card that says this, right? Make sure that you're doing a lot more explaining and a lot more of and using a lot more rhetoric than you are just reading off of sheets of paper. That's going to be really helpful with these types of judges. The third type of judge that you're probably going to see is going to be the judge that judges on those local circuits, right? That never leaves the states but judges at a lot of the local tournaments and the state tournament, right? So that means that when you have different states, you're going to get judges who have a very nuanced sense of public forum, right? They have a very specific sense of what PF is and how PF should be because that's how it is in their state and that's how they judge it all the time. So you're going to have to conform to those standards. So my first recommendation is obviously to go ahead and ask the judges for preferences before the round begins, right? Like make sure everyone's settled in, and like before you do the coin toss or before you go ahead and before the coin toss and before the round starts, make sure that you ask the judges their preferences and that you can tailor your judging towards those judges because otherwise you're gonna have a very hard time breaking at nationals. Nationals is also a fairly difficult break because you have 6 prelims, they're all randomly paired, and you have 2 judges in each round, which means that you're going to have to, in order to make it to elim rounds, you have to win 8 out of those 12 ballots. So what that means is your job is going to have to be to make sure that you can go ahead and adapt to each of these different judges in the round because you may end up getting, say, one flow judge from Florida in the round and one judge from Wyoming, right, who have very different paradigms, have very different conceptions of what PF is, and you're going to have to adjust and try and win both of those ballots. Although the thing I will say about the rounds that you'll have at nationals is that they are randomly paired before the tournament starts. You'll get a packet that has all 6 of your rounds before the tournament begins, so you know the code of the teams that you're hitting all the time. So what that means is you'll know who you're hitting, but that means that there's no powering, right? Like normal tournaments, the round 3 will be based off of rounds 1 and 2, and by the time you get to round 6, the 2 5-0s are hitting, and the 4 1s are hitting, and the 3 2s are hitting. At nationals, someone who has 10 ballots going into round 6 can be debating someone who has 0 or 2 ballots going into round 6, right? So that means is that your rounds are going to be very random in who you're going to be competing against. You could be competing against a national circuit debater, or you can go ahead and be competing against someone who debates only in their state, and this might be their second or third tournament, and they were able to qualify to nationals, and they're just here for the experience. It's going to be a really random tournament, but the problem is not necessarily the people you're going to be debating, but the judges that you're going to have to be debating in front of. That's going to be your biggest obstacle in order to make it to elimination rounds at nationals. That also being said, the best thing I can tell you to win any type of judge at nationals is going to be to weigh. I know I've said this in my in the past video topic analysis I've done and all the written topic analysis I do for the briefs that you guys need to do a good job of weighing. at this tournament especially, because at this tournament, the only way that you can truly win the judge's ballot, or a judge who isn't flowing the round, or a judge who has seen very few public forum rounds, is to convince them that your arguments matter more than your opponent's arguments, right? You need to use emotional appeal, you need to use ethos and pathos and logos in order to show the judge the reasoning behind your arguments and why the impacts of your arguments are bigger than those of your opponents. Now, this topic is you guys got kind of lucky because a lot of the arguments that you have on this topic are going to be evidence-based and are going to be are going to be evidence-based and numbers-based, which means that you'll be able to easily compare them, right? You'll easily be able to compare, like, this many lives versus this many lives. But the harder part of weighing on this topic is going to be talking about, say, blowback theory compared to the benefits that we get from taking out terrorist leaders, the benefits that we've gotten from the war on drugs and using drones there. So that's where the problem with weighing is going to come in, and it's going to be very important that you go ahead and give the judge a standard at the beginning of the round as to how they should be weighing the round, and make sure that you use that throughout the debate to prove your arguments true, and to go ahead and make sure that your arguments are flowing through into the judge's mind and that they're paying attention, they're buying your arguments more than they're buying your opponent's arguments, and even if they're buying both arguments, that your argument somehow is still more important. That's going to be really key, and you're going to have to tailor that to the arguments you choose to run in your case. So, at the top of the case, I usually recommend that you have some sort of framework, right, and you label it an observation or whatnot. For nationals, I think you need to approach it a little bit differently. I don't think that you should be having a framework that precludes ground on either side, because one, I don't think it's necessary on this topic, but two, what I think is really important is that you go ahead and establish that weighing mechanism I was talking about a couple seconds ago at the top of the case. Don't label it an observation, like don't say we observe, or, go ahead and just before you begin your arguments, make sure you explain to the judge what is the most important thing in the round and why it's the most important thing in the round. Because weighing doesn't mean anything if it's not warranted. So you have to go ahead and warrant that weighing mechanism and make sure the judge knows exactly why these are the impacts that they should be preferring in the round in order to gain their ballot at the end of the day. So that's going to be fairly important. Remember that you're going to have to extend that in every single speech and make sure you tie it into every argument that you use in the rebuttal, right? Maybe if you're going down the rebuttal, have 2 or 3 responses to an argument, and then the 4th response be a weighing analysis comparing to your case or to comparing to turns that you've already read on the case, right? Make sure that you begin weighing the rebuttal speech at nationals, because I think it's going to be very important for you guys to go ahead and win these judges over. It's going to be a lot easier if you're going ahead and weighing what you're saying, the arguments that you're using from the get-go, right? Right off the bat. If the judges can understand them better, you should be fine. So I guess let's first talk about the pro side, and I think the way you approach the pro side is you have a first you should have a 2 or 3 contention case. I would say for nationals, 3 contentions would probably suit you better. But I think the first contention should be that drones are effective. And if you'll go ahead and look at the brief that we have written for you guys for the nationals topic, you can go ahead and have 3 subpoints under that, or you don't have to, right? You can have drones are successful in Pakistan, drones are successful in Yemen, and drones are successful on the war on terror. Or sorry, not on the war on terror, on the war on drugs. So that way, you start off with a 3-pronged approach to the topic, saying, look, these things are awesome, and look how much progress we've made on these 3 fronts. So that way, if your opponents take out 1 or 2, or if your opponents go ahead and read generic responses to this argument, you can still pull out the nuanced evidence to be like, yeah, but they're looking in this way, and make the argument that you don't have to defend drone use as it is now, but that you can defend smart drone use and say, if it's not working here, let's change it, and go ahead and use the effective strategies that we're using, say, in Pakistan compared to Yemen. This type of argument will allow you to wiggle around and go ahead and bypass a lot of the generic response that you're going to get from the negative side about how drones are really ineffective and how drones are bad for America's image, or increase the amount of terror that we have to fight. And that's going to be very important. The second argument I think that you guys should have should be one about how the current war is working, right? Talk about how drones are able to help us, how drones are able to help us, I guess, get our foot soldiers off the ground, and help us, advance our causes without having to spend as much money, or without having to, put soldiers on the ground, having to, spend, waste soldiers' lives. I think that's going to be very important, right? I think that's another, a second argument that you could add under that, right? I think the problem is that this topic is so narrow that there isn't a lot of diversity in the arguments that you can go ahead and have. So I think that maybe on the pro side, a 2 contention case would suit you best, with drones are really effective in these 3 or 4 areas, as we show you in the brief. And then the second argument would be like that this is a sustainable strategy, and that this is the best thing that we can do, because having foot soldiers on the ground isn't always effective and hasn't been effective in the war on terror. We've always lost men. We've always met men and women. It's always cost us a lot of money. So that way, you can make the argument that drones save us money and save soldiers' lives, which means that they're the best alternative to go ahead and take to make sure that we are winning this war. I think that's going to be pretty important for you guys throughout the tournament, is making sure that you can extend those impacts about saving like soldiers' lives, because you may get a judge who has a child in the service, or a husband in the service, or has their wife or their daughter in the service, and that's going to be really important, so you can connect with these judges and make sure that they feel for you and they feel for the arguments that you're running, and they understand the implications that they have. So I think that's going to be the best strategy for you to take on the pro side, because that way when you weigh, you can be like, nothing's more important than saving American lives, and the cost of this war is becoming too great. You can tie in the economic sequester, and you can tie the economic, the hard economic times we're going through, and I think that'll be really important and a really good way for you guys to go ahead and connect with these judges in order to gain their ballots at the end of the day. So on the con side, I think you do the exact opposite of what I said on the pro, and start off with a basic argument about drones are ineffective in subpoint A here, subpoint B here, subpoint C here. In the brief, we have we talk about how they violate Pakistani state sovereignty and how drone use in Yemen is harmful. So I think you start off the contention with drones in general are ineffective, and then break off into these two specific subsections, because there are a lot of unique impacts that come from the specific country, as opposed to just the drone program as a whole. And I think that'll be really beneficial and really nuanced for you guys. That way you can go ahead and weigh these arguments, in front of these judges, and be like, look, this is what's actually happening. This is what's actually happening, and this is what we need. In this program is doing a lot of harm in this country and in this country, and they're doing it in two different ways. Then I think the other way the second argument you can talk about would be how drone use increases anti-U.S. sentiment, and then the impact of that would be blowback theory, and how basically when you go ahead and use drones, you end up creating more terrorists, and you turn the culture of the war against Americans, right? Like, the whole point of the war is to win the hearts and mind of the people in, say, Pakistan or Afghanistan or Yemen, where we're using drones, but that drones are doing the exact opposite. They're forcing people to go into the hands of the Taliban, or the hands of the terrorist organizations that we're targeting in these countries. So I think that's going to be really important. The other argument, and I think this should be the last argument in your case that I really like for this, that I really like on this topic, are the arguments that talk about how it sets a bad precedent for U.S. For future use, or how it creates the disconnect between the people and the government, right? Because I think that this allows you a unique impact that isn't simply like, we've saved this number of lives, we've saved X number of lives. It allows you to talk about how, say, like countries like Russia and China are can't go ahead and undertake these programs, but they think they can because of the way the U.S. is doing it. So it creates a lot more international harms. And then you can talk about harms to U.S. image from the drone program, and future harms because of the precedent that we set. So I think that way you attack the topic from, look, they're really ineffective and they do a lot of harm. Look, they're going ahead and actually creating more of a problem than they're helping. And guys, also, they're really bad for our image internationally, and countries aren't going to want to work with us if we're violating their sovereignty. Countries aren't going to want to work with us if they see us committing these atrocities, when on the other side we're going ahead and complaining about human rights violations that are occurring in other countries. And it means that what we're doing goes ahead and gives the okay to other countries like Russia and China, that they can do the exact same thing and get away with it. I think that this sets up a really strong three-pronged case for you on the negative side that can win you a lot of rounds throughout the tournament. My one objection to this topic is going to be the fact that the data that comes along with drones is going to be very skeptical, and it's very wishy-washy, because you'll read numbers from the U.S. government that says that we've only killed like 10 civilians in a year, and you'll read numbers from the Pakistani government that says we've killed 400 civilians throughout the year, right? So it's going to be very important to find a way to distinguish between, which numbers are correct and how these studies come to the numbers that they do. There's going to be a lot of debate and a lot of nitty-gritty debate about why we should be trusting this source, or why this study's conclusions about the number of civilians versus terrorists killed is different and incorrect compared to this study. but luckily we have all that information for you in the brief. So I wish you all good luck at the national tournament. I'll see you guys there. I'll be at the expo. Come by, stop by the table. We'll be happy to help you out and answer some questions for you. Good luck. See you guys later.